This is your psychic girlfriend, Robin Richardson. And if you're like me, you're interested in how the universe works and in all things mystical. So let's explore it together. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the podcast. Hi, this is Robin Richardson, your psychic girlfriend, and I have another exciting episode for you today. And you know, we make the mystical typical. And I am so pleased to welcome my friend, mentor, inspirer, HeyJune. And she's a highly sought after intuitive coach, business consultant, and storyteller with over 1 million followers across all social media platforms. She was born in Seoul and raised in Berlin, and she spent 10 years in New York cutting her teeth in Wall Street and venture-backed tech startups before founding her very, very cool Pheydrus metaverse. You've got to check this out. She helps high-performing individuals shake out linear ways of thinking so that they can direct their energy, focus, and time into their truly aligned path. Her approach combines years of training with some of the leading writers, mystics, coaches, and business leaders. She has been featured in Forbes, Fox Business, Allure, New York Post, and more. And more recently, she just did a TEDx talk, and I am so excited to talk to you. Welcome, HeyJune. How are you?
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for inviting me to your platform. You are a mentor to me as well, so I'm very flattered that you consider me a mentor.
Well, you are. You have encouraged me, and you encourage so many people. You bring so much to the spiritual mystical world, and I am so curious to talk to you about a lot of different things. But we are going to talk today about, first of all, period 9 and your talk and your TED talk on quantum relationships. And so I want to hear more about what is period 9 and how does it relate to quantum relationships? What's going on in this universe?
Yeah. So Earth has its own age, its own timeline, its own life path, and we are living on Earth and we individually have our own life paths. But as Earth changes, we have to adapt to Earth's, I guess, like personality changing. So in Chinese astrology, period 9 is really a Chinese astrology concept. There are 9 periods within a 180-year cycle, and each period consists of 20 years. So we are in the 9th period within this one giant circle. So we're finishing a 180-year segment, and period 9, which started this year, is going to continue for the next 20 years because each period is 20-year cycle. And it actually aligns pretty nicely to the Western astrology of Pluto going into Aquarius. They share very similar qualities. But essentially what this means is Earth is now shifting away from masculinity and stepping more into feminine energy, stepping away from agriculture, real estate, anything ruled by the earth element, because period 8 was ruled by earth element, and instead shifting now into being ruled by the fire element, which is all about technology and creativity, information, time no longer being this linear construct, but more quantum, which is basically what technology and AI has enabled us to do, to work, operate at hyperspeed and transfer information at hyperspeed. So I think that, social media is an obvious manifestation of us stepping into period 9, but that is like a low hanging fruit. I think the less obvious, but definitely very pervasive manifestation of period 9 is that we're moving away from geographical connections and more into cloud-based connections. So now people are able to connect, beyond their tribe. You're not stuck with people that you share blood with anymore. Now you could sort of travel really far through the internet and meet people from other parts of the world who may share similar values as you. So that's been something that I've been talking a lot about, because I think people are kind of having to reorient themselves when it comes to forming relationships. Like, how do you form healthy relationships that's beyond family. Not that I think family relationship was ever really healthy, but especially now that we're shifting to technology-based era, how do we establish trust? How do we establish, not even establish, figure out who we can really connect with, and figure out our values. So a lot of my work now is centered around helping people navigate and adapt to this new era.
Yes, I know. It's amazing. So, for the person who like isn't really aware of this, but is, tapping into like an energy unconsciously, what tips could you give them on how to maximize this next period?
Someone who's not necessarily aware of the energy speak. Yeah, I think the first thing is, um what's funny is, and I'm sure you can agree to this, I think what like the ancient mystical sages and gurus, what they've been saying hasn't fundamentally really changed,
Mhm.
which is about just be true to yourself, like speak your truth, do what lights you up, follow your passion, follow your joy. Like I don't think any of that has really changed, but I think stakes are higher now. That's what I think has shifted because people are getting less and less patient. They want the reality to catch up faster to what they really want. People don't want to, especially Gen Zs, like don't want to go into a 9 to 5 office cubicle space. I did my fair share of that. I know you did for many, many years. But now people feel the urgency around, okay, I really want to live my life purpose now, or at least do what I love. So that has never changed in terms of, yeah, find out who you are and pursue that relentlessly. Go all in, put all the chips on the table.
Yeah, I agree with you. Like I feel like even like with the pandemic, it's forced us to really find out what we value, and a lot of people know that they can get their work done if even if they don't go to an office, and they're much
Yeah.
more relaxed. They might even work more, but you know.
Yeah.
But I agree. I've seen it with my own self in shifting. I'm like, okay, I don't want to deal with the commute, and while I love being with people, my own values have shifted into something different. Now here I am, right?
Yeah. Absolutely. And I don't know if you have observed this, but I think the consequences are kind of bigger now of people suffering through circumstances that they don't want to go through. They it does something to their personality, their energy, their being. If someone has to suffer through environments that they don't want to.
Mhm.
Whereas like I feel like our ancestors and our, older generations, they just kind of like muster through it, like brute force. Like now I think people like I think I saw that autoimmune disease like on the rise. I think these are all like manifestations of people. It's like the body being like, hey, you can't live in this reality anymore.
It's true. It's true. So, what is a quantum relationship? Like, explain to me. You did a great talk. I know my audience of five, whatever it is right now, would love to know.
Well,
What?
you're a quantum relationship to me. So I think this is definitely an example that we can dive into. But period 9 was actually, well, not even just period 9. There's a whole separate shift happening on Earth called incarnation cross shift of planning to sleeping phoenix, and that was about 400 years. So um, before we were in a very much transactional relationship space. Whether or not people want to admit that, that was just the reality. In fact, people had children so that they can, farm. They needed manpower to farm. So everyone had a role to play in the family. A man and a woman got married and they each, had division of labor. One brought bacon, one made home or whatever. And the underpinning of all of that was, in order for me to survive, I need to provide something of tangible value and I need to be needed. I think that was a true underpinning. And in the past several decades, especially as food, fortunately we live in an advanced country, so food is not an issue. But if you had your basic needs met, that old paradigm of relationships was placed under immense pressure for people to be able to prove their value in other ways,
Mhm.
which then I think gave birth to something that you and I were talking about, like narcissistic personality. Like, okay, I can't give you money and food, but what are some other ways I can earn your affection and love?
Right.
And that's created all these weird permutations of survival mechanisms in people. So I think that now, but at the same time, I think that's also the reason why like culture developed. Like if you look at these come up stories of like amazing singers and celebrities, like they came from a place of deep insecurity and they wanted to be loved and embraced and want to prove themselves. So it's like now we have this great art and literature But they're narcissists. A lot of them are. So now, now that we've swung to that extreme, and plus times are changing, we're going to quantum relationship era, which is now more about how could I help you remember that you're valuable and that you have a purpose and a path on this planet, um, independent of what you can do for me. Because I think very much beforehand, it was like basically we're learning how to become more generous in spirit, I think. Because I think before it was very much like I can't be generous in spirit with you if I feel a lack, if I'm insecure, if I feel like I don't feel safe in this tribe.
Yeah.
We're getting away from them. We're now stepping into how could I just help you continue to grow and live your full potential, independent of like where I'm at in life, because truly your path has nothing to do with mine, quite frankly. And the irony is the more we do that for each other, the more improved all our lives become because we are so entangled together. So on a super duper high level, that's the gist.
Yeah. It makes a lot of sense too, because what I've noticed, and to your point, um, relationships, especially marriages, were transactional because, like you said, and now there's this, upswing in the past, I don't know how many years, but of romantic love. And what does that look like? Because that wasn't the way relationships were. There was women were property. Men needed to have whatever they needed to have in order to grow a family and farm and whatever. So like now with the quantum relationships, um, how does like how are the narcissists doing? Like I want to ask this because there's such a rise, as you said, in pointing out narcissism and narcissistic traits. And I hate to call and label somebody a narcissist because I really, I think it's all over a spectrum.
Definitely.
But when I had to say, let's see, I don't know, it's about 20 something years ago, I was aware of what narcissism meant, and it was not as prevalent as it is now. Like to like point to somebody and go, that person's a vulnerable narcissist or a malignant narcissist, all these different like labels. So how do we connect like period 9 with the rise of narcissism and having healthy quantum relationships? Can that even be answered, or just what is your view on that? And we can talk a little bit about narcissism too, because I know that's big.
I'm so happy you asked this question. And I'm really happy that you connected these dots because those are the exact same dots I'm trying to connect. The whole covert narcissism thing is something that recently came into my radar, but it really, oh my gosh, I just got this like really clear message around like how important this is the minute I downloaded it. Because you're right, like it wasn't really a thing 20, 30 years ago. The things that did exist was more like malignant, like Donald Trump archetype.
Right. Right.
But those are easy because they're obvious and you
Right.
just kind of avoid them. But to answer your question about the connection between period 9 and covert narcissism, well, I think that our parents' generations uh had to fight for survival because they were operating within that transactional paradigm. They had to literally earn a seat at the dining table to be valued and worth and to be the golden child or whatever. And they sort of passed down onto the next generation, which is like my generation, but stepping into this new paradigm of like social media and technology and AI, where there's so many opportunities to like grab a microphone and shoot a video and like display yourself. People are now broadcasting and advertising their wounds, which is fine. I actually think that's okay. But where it gets dangerous is they stay there instead of growing and taking responsibility for their own lives. So the signature trait of a covert narcissist is that they stay in their sob story and they don't actually break through that.
Hmm.
It's like I am the way I am because my mother beat me up and da 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 da. And that's also why I'm abusive to you. But hopefully you forgive me because you know my story. That's very much the covert narcissistic trait. So what period 9 has done, and this is actually a real danger, is everyone just turning on a camera and a microphone and broadcasting their story without the insight, without the okay, now what do you do? How do you get better? The other shadow aspect of period 9 is that people get into competitive and comparison mode.
Mm,
Oh, this person has this platform and has this many followers and can, and, has this whatever. How come I don't, And once again, like they were trained and we were all programmed by our parents that we got to be something. So it's so easy to criticize ourselves and no, sorry, not even criticize, just compare and just get bitter and resentful. So I think I've never actually put it this way before, so it's kind of interesting, but I do think technology has simultaneously given us the platform to succeed, but also the platform to continue in our self-justification of like why we can't move forward
fair
and play the
enough.
victim.
Yeah, it plays in a big loop, I think, especially if you don't have a sense of yourself. Like I've noticed that I am not addicted. I'm addicted to social media in some ways, and I've noticed that addiction. And then I like just cut myself off, and I'm like trying to use it rather than it use me. So it's kind of this shift in perspective. Same with, television and all sorts of other ways to distract from either achieving my goals or intentions, but also, like recognizing who I am, when I'm not engaged in distractions like that.
Yeah.
But it's hard because it's how we relate to other people. It's how I get my information from what my friends are doing, people that I don't necessarily talk to or be with on a day to day.
But I want to point out the fact that like you have so much data and evidence in terms of the work that you do. You have so much evidence and proof that you're good at what you do, and you've had clients throughout the years. Before the online social media thing was a thing, you've been like a working psychic for correct me if I'm wrong, but like almost 2 decades, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
I think kids in my generation and actually people who are younger than me are just coming out of the woodworks and wanting this validation without the tangible evidence that someone like yourself has accumulated over decades. It's so that's the shadow side. It's like, okay, you want quick results. Well, too bad. You kind of have to earn it. You got to have insurmountable evidence that you're legit. And instead of putting that hard work in, I think a lot of people go on that social media, do the comparison thing and get sulky.
Yeah. That can be true. And I just remember I just remember, the internet wasn't a thing
Yeah.
when I started. Like people came to me from word of mouth, like just
Yeah.
magically, I guess. But with the rise of the internet, like I actually remember like steps where I'd be like, I wonder if people are giving readings online. And then I'd be like, oh, I guess they are. I guess I can too, you know? And yeah, so I've seen the rise of the internet. I've seen the rise of social media, you know, and I was lucky and fortunate at the time when I was going through my divorce that there were people that were already kind of understanding how to use it,
Hmm.
even though I was just like, I don't know what Twitter is, I'm on Twitter, but I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing,
Yeah.
what am I supposed to be doing? How am I supposed to use this? Facebook was a little easier, obviously, but, you
What are
know,
your what are your but I'm curious to hear from you. 'Cause you said you noticed there was a rise in covert narcissism too over the past 2 decades. Independent of technology and social media, what do you think contributed to people playing the victim and not wanting to transcend it?
oh,
Because that
I think they've always been. I just think that there's more
mm,
information there, because the internet is full of information, there's more opportunity to, understand it. There's more people that are like becoming experts. Whereas when I first became aware of narcissists, I mean, it was like this one guy who was a narcissist who was saying, this is like, I have no empathy for people. Like,
mm,
I'm never going to change. But yet here he was, I tried to look him up before this, but I was like, here's a guy who obviously knew he was a narcissist, which was
right,
unusual. But at the
right.
same time, he was the only person really out there saying this is what it is.
Yeah.
And then I feel, because I believe when you put a lot of energy to it, it expands.
Yeah.
So is this something that like is just expanding in our awareness? I think so. I think it always was there.
That's so interesting. I did not realize that. You're right. I think there's more data and research surrounding it now, for sure.
Mhm.
Uh, that's giving people language. And period 9, by the way, is also about exploring these themes like mental health, schizophrenia, brain. We're definitely stepping away from, because before it was all about like, how do we engineer our crops so that we don't starve.
Right.
I think period 9 is definitely about like how do we re-engineer our internal wiring so that we don't like kill each other. I think we're stepping into that.
I hope so. I mean, and like it makes a lot of sense. Whereas my parents who went through, because I know you're not born a narcissist. It's just your
Definitely.
babies are not narcissists. But what I did research on it, some sort of traumatic or event may have occurred, or emotional neglect, which created a lot of insecurity. And then we have these people that are raising people like me and you. And then, did an event happen? Maybe. But I think for me, it's just like I was raised by that type of energy. So I became very self-aware, and I'm like, shit's going down. And I'm not like, this is not me. I had to separate what myself was. And it's taken a long time because those roots go deep, right?
And I was reading from Dr. Ramani. If you were raised by a covert narcissistic parent, you're going to fall for covertly narcissistic romantic partners.
Yes.
So when we talked a few weeks ago about romance, remember how we talked about how like, oh shit, we keep falling for or we keep connecting with men or women, doesn't even really matter, just people who display vulnerability, but it's not real
Right.
vulnerability. Turns out that's covert narcissism. It's like, okay, I'm sorry all these things happened to you, and kind of weird that you're sharing this with me so soon, but where's the insight?
Oh yeah, it was a hook for me. It was
Me too.
it was like, oh, tell me your story. And they would tell me a story, and I'd be like, okay, let's get married. It was just like what the heck,
Yeah,
you know. But that's what, I was raised with it. My
exactly. Like we're so conditioned to be the fixer.
Mhm. Yeah, either, be somebody else's emotional support at the expense of my own self.
Mhm.
To the point where I did mold myself into being what they wanted, but I was rebelling at the same time, thankfully, because now I'm
Yeah.
not in that dynamic anymore. Um, and we talked about too is that while all this stuff is happening, all these people are there and we attract all this stuff, it's really a me problem. The
Definitely.
narcissists go on to be your bad self, but when I track somebody and I recognize that that's the pattern, then I have to shift myself. And that's what, this education about narcissism has been super helpful, to like recognize the signs and recognize that the root causes aren't, there are unmet needs that someone had, so I can have compassion for that, but I don't want anything to do with it. And they don't make good partners for me.
Mhm. I think that is the number one evidence that we are not narcissists. Because a real narcissist will never, ever, ever acknowledge
No,
that they're the origin of their life's problems. And in fact, like it's kind of scary that they don't really change. That's actually very disheartening.
it is sad for them. I feel sad for them,
Definitely.
honestly, because they just can't see it or won't see it. And I was involved with one for a long time, and I feel like he did not have the capacity to look deep within because that pain,
Hmm.
he didn't even know it was there to look for it, which is really sad. you know
What can you expand upon that? Because what is that pain that what's like the consequence for them, you think, of looking at that pain? I think I kind of know, but I'd like to get your take on it because
well
clearly for them it's a huge threat.
I think so. I mean, if their parents were neglectful, or they weren't emotionally connected to them, or whatever, and this particular person had parents that grew up in World War II, you know
Hmm.
and they lived through bombings, and they live
Hmm.
through all sorts of things. Um, so I think this is, I'm just speculating. I'm not a psychologist. I have no freaking idea for sure, but this is what I felt was that pain of being neglected by someone you loved and want approval from, who wasn't capable of it. To look at that inside and to feel that pain, it's too hard. It's that, like, that small child that was like not, that felt unloved and uncared for, even though
Hmm.
the surface, the food was there, the education was there, the housing was there, all that was there, the basics were met, but the emotional needs
Hmm.
were not.
Hmm. I completely agree with all that. And I think there's also this fear of, it goes back to like, I can't be outcasted or I'll not live.
Mm,
I can't be expelled from this tribe. So it's almost like if they acknowledge some truth there, this fear kicks up that that they still might be expelled from the tribe.
could be.
Al-
Yeah.
Although that's entirely false.
Yeah. But one of the signs that I saw was the inability to be accountable to the behavior that wasn't, like, that I was presenting, saying this is uncool, and not in a dramatic way because I really practiced that. But the person never apologizing, never really feeling that empathy. Like, you knew it was missing. I was just like, what the hell is
Right.
happening here? I
Right.
am tears
Mm-hmm.
and you're like a stone wall.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you can't even like sit with me and be like, oh my gosh, I hurt my girlfriend,
Mm-hmm.
you know.
I think that goes back to the tribal fear. If I acknowledge that I hurt you, then that makes me a bad guy and I don't belong in this tribe with you. And therefore, I can't be the bad guy because that means
Hmm.
I don't have a seat. I truly believe it kind of goes back to that. As crazy as that sounds, it's like I can't do no wrong because if I admit I'm wrong, then I can't be with you.
Right. And and like, I had to work through that a lot because that was what I was taught. So to like apologize or to be truly remorseful or whatever, it took
Mm-hmm.
practice for me because I was very empathetic,
Mm-hmm.
but at the same time I didn't want to make a mistake, and so I didn't want to admit to that,
Right.
you know. But it took a long time to just be like, I'm human.
Yeah.
I make mistakes. And I still kind of struggle with that sometimes. It's just like, oops,
Yeah.
facing the action and owning it. Like, I don't do it that often now, but when I do, I was like, oh great. Now I have to step up and be like accountable.
Yeah. Uh, it definitely it's definitely very tricky because you're right. Like nobody's born a narcissist. It's like there's always some really painful incident that creates a personality. Um, but I think this is where I think I really challenge and encourage spiritual content creators to embrace this more. It's like I understand that vulnerability, that whole movement was great and powerful and authenticity. Yeah, yeah, like awesome. Like now we all know to be vulnerable and authentic. But actually do something about it instead of sitting in that story. I think that's chapter 2.
Mm,
Um and what I mean by do something about it is exactly what you just said, like take accountability, like even if you didn't wrong anybody per se, you can at least not define your whole life by a function of what happened to you in the past.
right. I was listening to a interview prior to this one about narcissism, and like there are narcissists that are really dangerous, and just
Mm,
to let our audience know, like, we're talking about your basic narcissistic traits, because some of these other people that are like, you're trapped in a relationship where there's violence and the possibility of, if you leave, you could be hurt. I get that somebody, that's some, you need to get help from that, for that, and I candidly, I was in a relationship that was that felt like that to me,
mhm, mhm.
where he would harm himself or me if I left.
Oh my
I
God.
believe that.
So that's like the malignant, the classic, very overtly dangerous,
Yeah.
like blackmail type. Yeah.
Yeah. And, thank God I had really great support system because I'm somebody that will not be I've never been someone that you could control fully.
Mhm.
I was always fighting with my mother. And then consequently my husband.
Mhm.
I don't do that anymore. I just cannot I made a vow to myself that I was going to live in peace,
Mhm.
which is part of the reason probably I'm still single, honestly.
But happier than ever.
Yes. Yeah.
So it sounds like you're saying you recognize that your ex-partner was like your mother. Like they
Oh
manifested
my
very
God.
similar narcissistic. Yeah.
And then the second major relationship in my life was like mirroring my father, who was very passive.
Right.
Still no accountability, but
Right.
yeah. And,
Right.
surprisingly, I don't know who's going to listen to this, but like, this is my viewpoint on my relationships, but, um, my husband is an incredibly spiritual person.
Hmm.
He's doing his best to work through what he grew up with. So I give him a
Mhm.
lot of kudos for that. Absolutely. Just not with me. Thank you.
Right. Yeah, we're gonna avoid the person who displays fake vulnerability and expects us to do emotional labor for them and meet all their needs when they're not taking account for their own actions. We're gonna no more of that.
No more. That's been done.
They did the pre-work before hanging out with us.
That's right. So, with this next period, and what do you suggest that we those who are shifting our vibration and wanting to maximize this next period to have healthy relationships, what is the top things that you think people should
Oh
do?
my gosh, I thought about that a lot and I have one answer, which is to be just completely confident in yourself. I think that's the ultimate cure. If you're radically confident, and you talk about this a lot, right? Like self-concept,
Mhm.
it's all the same thing. Like if you fully accept yourself, if you're fully confident, you would not tolerate a lot of the bullshit that comes your way because covert narcissists, even though they don't beat you up, even though they're not, you know, abusive, there is psychological manipulation going on 100%.
Yeah,
It's like if you're super confident in yourself, you would not tolerate that. And also, I know that at least about myself now. And also, covert narcissists display underlying competitiveness and jealousy.
mm,
They really do. They really, really do, which is really confusing because you're like, wait, I first thought you were like this person. Now you're like jealous. So you can avoid becoming a covert narcissist once again if you're confident so that you don't get competitive and don't get jealous. You know you're special and unique and you'll go in the direction of your dreams and you don't fall into this like trapping of woe is me in comparison. Like I really think that's the ultimate antidote.
I agree.
That,
100%.
that's why I've been telling people to be selfish, you know, not self-centered. That's different. That's actually like true narcissists, but like selfish in terms of just prioritizing what makes you happy.
Yeah. And living life on your terms, really. I really appreciate you coming on here and having this conversation with me. I know we do this all the time when they're not recorded. So thank
You
you for
know, we
taking.
finally record it. Yeah.
So how can people get in touch with you? I absolutely put it in the description and link everything to you, but how do you get in contact with you?
They could follow me on Instagram, Pheydrus Official. Same thing on TikTok, Pheydrus Official. And, watch some of my content and engage with me there.
Absolutely. And I love you. I appreciate you. And I hope to have another conversation with you and we can talk about other things because I know there's some really awesome things that you're involved with that I think
This was such an awesome podcast experience. Thank you so much for having me, Robin.
oh, my pleasure. Thanks for listening to my podcast. If you would like more information on me, go to yourpsychicgirlfriend.com or become a bestie at robinrichardson.locals.com for free trainings, readings, and more. Join my community. And if you'd like to know more about my guest, please see the description and support her. Thank you so much.